My girlfriend said she was afraid to sleep alone while I was on the night shift, but she seemed much more comfortable with someone else in our bed. I didn't make a scene. He didn't scream. I just rented her apartment on Airbnb. Now, to spend the night at her place, she needs to make an advance payment. I don't mind the nights. In fact, I prefer them. The quiet, the solitude. It gives me a sense of peace. I work the graveyard shift at a tech support center, helping clients with issues that seem urgent to them, but barely matter to me. It's a simple job, really. I get paid for it, I'm good at it, and that's enough. My days are mine, and most importantly, my nights are mine too. I thought Sophie and I had something solid. We'd been together for almost 2 years, and on the surface, things seemed great. She was the kind of woman who would send me little texts just to check in, even though we both knew I couldn't respond until after my shift. She'd send me pictures of things we had planned to do together, some show we'd talked about going to, a dinner at a new place, an art exhibit. She liked to plan, and I liked to follow along. Everything seemed comfortable. Everything seemed right. But there was always this one thing Sophie would say every time I left for work. "I hate sleeping alone when you're on shift," she would whisper, her face tucked into the pillow, eyes still heavy with sleep. I'd just smile, kiss her on the forehead, and tell her, "I'll be home soon. You'll be fine." She'd nod, but I could always sense that she wasn't quite at ease. Maybe it was just my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about the way she said it. Like she wasn't just talking about the bed. She was talking about more than that. It didn't bother me at first, of course. People say things like that when they miss someone, right? But things started to feel off after a while. I'm not one to jump to conclusions, and I certainly wasn't about to make a scene. I'd been in enough relationships to know that paranoia was a quick route to ruining things, so I kept my doubts to myself. I didn't mention the small things that started to make me uneasy. I let it slide, let it fester in the back of my mind like a low hum. Then one morning after another long shift, I came home to find her still in bed. Her hair was messy, her eyes slightly red from sleep. I'd barely set my bag down when I noticed it. A strange detail, barely noticeable, but enough to catch my eye. Footprints in the living room. Faint, barely visible, but enough to make me pause. I glanced over at Sophie, who was now fully awake, her phone in hand, scrolling through something. I didn't say anything at first. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe she had just gotten up to get some water or check her phone. It wasn't unusual for her to be up late, especially when I was at work. But those footprints, they weren't mine. I shrugged it off. Maybe I was just tired, overthinking. That night I came back home earlier than usual, still feeling that odd tug in my chest. There were the prints again, only this time, they seemed clearer. They led from the hallway to the kitchen, as if someone had been walking around while I was gone. I stood there, trying to make sense of it. Sophie had been home, right? She hadn't gone anywhere. It wasn't like she was hiding anything. She wasn't the type to keep secrets. But then again, neither was I. And still, I felt uncomfortable. I went into the kitchen to grab a snack, trying to push the thoughts aside. When I turned back around to the hallway, that's when I noticed something else. Her phone was on the kitchen counter, face up. The screen lit up with a notification that caught my eye, an unread message. I didn't think much of it at first. She'd left her phone unlocked before, but this time there was something different about it. The message wasn't from her usual contacts. It was anonymous. "You should have been more careful. He's always working late, isn't he?" My heart skipped a beat. It was a harmless message. Just a text, nothing overtly incriminating, but it hit me in a way I hadn't expected. I stared at it for a moment longer than I should have. I could feel the creeping sense of unease settling into the pit of my stomach. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't my imagination. It was something real. Something was happening, but I didn't know what, and I wasn't about to jump to conclusions. Instead, I just pocketed my phone and walked back to the living room. Sophie was still scrolling through her phone, completely unaware that I had seen the message. I tried to push it out of my mind, tried to act normal, but I couldn't. Not now, not with that message hanging over me. And yet I didn't say a word. I didn't make a scene. I didn't get angry. I didn't even ask her about it. That's not who I was. But something had shifted inside me. I knew this wasn't going to be a confrontation. I wasn't the type to yell or demand answers. No, I was going to find out what was really going on, and I was going to do it my way. The next few days were a blur of routine. I stayed quiet, observed more, looked for any clues that would help me piece it together. But the signs kept piling up, small things that I couldn't ignore. The way she avoided certain topics when I brought them up, the strange nights when I came home and she was already in bed, the moments when I'd catch her looking at her phone in a way that made me wonder if she was hiding something. And then there was the feeling I couldn't shake. I wasn't the one who was being told the truth anymore. She had built a wall around herself that I couldn't see past, and I wasn't going to settle for just a vague sense of betrayal. I didn't know exactly what was going on, but I was going to find out. I wasn't going to confront her. I wasn't going to accuse her. I wasn't going to make this about emotions or guilt. I was going to handle it differently. I was going to be smarter than that. There's a certain kind of calm that comes with knowing you're about to make a decision that changes everything, yet you still move forward with a clear mind. I had been observing Sophie, gathering my thoughts, and I realized that I wasn't the one who had lost control of the situation. She was. She just didn't know it yet. I didn't want to rush into anything, but I wasn't going to stand around, waiting for her to slip up any further. I had to take control of the situation in a way that left no room for argument, no room for her to turn this against me. I'd seen the signs. I had the feeling that she wasn't being entirely truthful with me, and now it was time to act. I didn't want to make a scene. That's the difference between me and a lot of other people. I wasn't about to explode. I wasn't going to be the angry guy who punched walls or yelled. No, I was going to play this smart, legally, cleanly. No drama, just strategy. I spent the next few days studying the situation. The apartment was in Sophie's name. I could see it from the lease agreement. She'd always acted like it was her space, even though I was the one who spent the majority of the time there. I had invested more in this relationship than she realized, and now I was going to take a little something back. It wasn't that I wanted to take her apartment from her. No, I didn't want her to lose anything she truly cared about. But I knew one thing for sure. If she wasn't being honest with me, there was no way she was going to get to stay in a place that was supposed to be our home. I spent hours going over the terms of the lease. The idea started to form in my head, slowly at first, and then all at once. What if I did something she wouldn't expect? What if I took control of the apartment, legally, without causing a single fight, without having to shout or accuse her? And that's when it hit me. Airbnb. I'd seen the commercials. I knew the process. It was simple. Too simple, almost. The best part was that everything was above board. Everything could be documented. Everything would be by the book. It wasn't some shady deal. It was just business. I wasn't about to move out. I wasn't going to make her think I was the one who couldn't handle things. No, instead, I'd take control in a way that would be impossible to argue with. I wasn't going to evict her. I was going to give her options. But those options would be inconvenient, to say the least. It started small. I didn't do anything crazy. I didn't need to. I checked Airbnb, looking at similar listings in our area, just to get a sense of what would be reasonable. I figured out the costs, the average nightly rates, and then I made my first move. I changed the locks. It was a subtle thing, one that she'd never notice at first. I swapped out the old lock for a digital one, installed a keypad. All of this was perfectly legal. The apartment was still hers, of course, but now there was an added level of control that she couldn't take back. When Sophie went to see her friend for the weekend, I took the opportunity to set everything in motion. I cleaned up the place, made sure everything was in order, and then I set up the Airbnb listing. I took pictures of the rooms, created a description that made the apartment look cozy and welcoming. I checked all the legal boxes. Everything was professional. I even included a few amenities to make the place more appealing to potential guests. I was the manager now. The listing said nothing about me being anything but the guy handling check-ins, and that's exactly how I wanted it. Sophie would have no clue that I was the one behind this new development in her life. The real brilliance of it, though, was that I wasn't even technically doing anything wrong. Sophie had said she was uncomfortable being alone at night. She had claimed that she needed someone to be there with her. Well, now she could have someone. but it wouldn't be me. I ran a few test bookings, quick ones just to see if everything was working. I didn't want to make it obvious, so I kept the bookings short. I kept everything running smoothly. The guests came and went without a hitch. I was careful, controlled, and Sophie was none the wiser. A week later, when she came back from her friend's place, I had everything ready. The apartment was pristine, as it had been when she left. But this time when she entered, I handed her the new code to the door lock. She gave me a puzzled look. "What's this for?" she asked. "The new lock," I said casually. "You can use it anytime you need it. The place is listed on Airbnb now, remember?" She stared at me. "You're joking, right? Why would you do that?" I shrugged. "I'm just managing the place while you're away. I figured you'd be okay with it. You said you didn't like being alone, right?" The look on her face was priceless. She tried to protest, but there was nothing she could say. I wasn't asking her for permission. I wasn't breaking any rules. I wasn't even really taking anything from her. I was just doing what needed to be done, legally and cleanly. She was furious at first, but she couldn't really do anything about it. She tried to fight me on it, but I just reminded her that everything was official, all above board. "You can always stay with your parents," I said with a wry smile, "if you don't like it here." The first few guests came and went without incident. Each time Sophie came home, she seemed a little more shocked, a little more rattled. But no matter how angry she got, no matter how much she yelled, she couldn't argue with the facts. I was just a manager, after all, and every time she left, I'd book a new guest. Just a couple of days here, a weekend there. I didn't need to be cruel about it. I just needed to take back what had been taken from me. I needed to show her that she couldn't manipulate the situation anymore. The apartment wasn't hers to control anymore. It's strange how quickly a plan can go from being a quiet, controlled operation to a complete mess of emotions. In the beginning, it had been satisfying, almost cathartic, to see Sophie's confusion, her fury, as she struggled with the reality that she had no say in the situation anymore. But over time, something started to shift. I began to feel unsettled. When Sophie walked in, the first time she saw a stranger coming out of the apartment, I could see the shock in her eyes. She tried to hide it, but she couldn't. It was a look of betrayal, and she was angry, so angry, but she didn't know where to direct it. I didn't even raise my voice. I was calm, collected, too much so. That was the most unsettling part for her. She tried to argue with me. "This isn't your place. You can't just rent it out like this." "I didn't rent it out," I replied. "I'm just managing it. You know, like a property manager. It's legal. It's your lease. I'm just handling the bookings. All the payments go to you too, remember?" I kept my tone even, but inside I was starting to get this gnawing feeling. The satisfaction I had felt earlier was now mingled with a strange discomfort. It wasn't guilt. No, it was something else. Something like the realization that this situation was no longer about revenge. It wasn't about punishing her. It was about taking control of my own life again. And in doing that, I was starting to lose the person I had once thought I knew. Sophie couldn't stand it. She'd spend her nights pacing around the apartment, checking the Airbnb app, trying to see who was coming next. She started to rant at me, to accuse me of everything under the sun. But what could she do? She had no leverage. She could scream and shout, but the moment I mentioned the word lease or legal rights, she fell silent. She had no real ground to stand on. Then came the unexpected. Sophie reached out to her friends for support. They'd always known me as the easygoing guy, the one who let things slide, who never made a scene. I wasn't the type to rock the boat. They came to visit, trying to talk some sense into me. "Why are you doing this?" Sophie's best friend Lisa asked me one night when Sophie wasn't home. "You've got to stop this. You don't need to be so dramatic." "Dramatic?" I repeated, giving her a tight smile. "I'm not being dramatic. I'm just looking out for myself now. You can't just kick Sophie out like that. She's your girlfriend." I looked at her for a long moment. I wasn't angry, but I could feel the coolness of my decision creeping in. It's not about kicking anyone out. It's about taking control of my life again. I spent too long letting this relationship be defined by what Sophie wanted. This time, I'm doing what's best for me. Lisa looked at me, her face hardening. "You know, normal people just talk things out. They don't go behind each other's backs and turn their apartments into Airbnb hotels." What's next, huh? Are you going to start selling her stuff while she's not home? I let her words sit in the air for a while before I spoke. You don't get it, Lisa. This isn't about hurting Sophie. It's about taking back what's mine without breaking anything or losing my dignity. I didn't do anything wrong. In fact, I'm doing this for her. She didn't want to be alone, remember? Well, now she has company every night. Lisa opened her mouth to argue but stopped herself, unable to find any words. I had won the argument with logic, and that felt satisfying in its own twisted way. It felt like I was finally regaining my self-respect. But Sophie wasn't going to let this go. The next time she came home, her face was pale. She slammed the door behind her and turned to me with that familiar mix of hurt and anger. I'm going to find a way to stop this, she said, her voice shaking with fury. You think you've won? You think this is over? I didn't even flinch. You're free to try, but everything is legal. Everything is in your name. I'm just the manager. You can have all the power in the world, but if you don't use it, someone else will. She stared at me, eyes wild, and for a moment, I could see that this was about more than just an apartment. It was about control, about who held the power in this relationship. You think this is funny? She spat, her voice low. You think this is going to make everything okay? I took a step closer, my tone level. No, I don't think it's funny. I think it's a wake-up call. For both of us. Her anger flared again, but I just shrugged. You should have been more honest with me, Sophie. You should have trusted me. But now you've got to deal with this, just like I had to deal with all the lies. The look on her face was one of disbelief. She had expected me to break down, to beg for forgiveness, but instead I stood there, calm, almost detached. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't need to be. I had already won. Sophie spent the next few weeks bouncing between her friends' houses, staying with anyone who would take her in. The truth was, she couldn't afford the apartment on her own, not without me there. And she couldn't stay with her parents, at least not without losing face. The more I watched her struggle, the more I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had thought she was in control, but I had taken it all back, without lifting a finger in anger, without a single outburst. All I had to do was play my cards right. The guests kept coming. Every night I'd check in new people, and every day Sophie would come home only to find the place a little more out of her reach. She would try to make me feel guilty, but the truth was I wasn't the one who had betrayed anyone. She had done that to herself. It's strange how, after all this, you can look at the person you once loved and feel absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, just nothing. And that's how I felt every time Sophie came home to the apartment that was no longer hers. Every time she knocked on the door or sent me messages demanding answers. She had tried everything to get me to crack. She had tried being sweet, trying to remind me of the good times we had, trying to make me feel guilty. But it didn't work. I was calm. Too calm. I knew the truth now. I didn't need her to make me feel whole. I didn't need her validation or approval. I was free. More free than I had been in years. The apartment was still in her name, and I was still just the manager. But she couldn't ignore the fact that the control had shifted, and that was the most beautiful part of it all. I had checked the digital booking system a few days ago and saw that the place was fully booked for the next month. Guests were coming and going. Some were polite, others were a little odd. But it didn't matter. Everything was running smoothly. Every time Sophie tried to come by and change the locks, I'd reset the code to something new. Every time she left, I'd welcome a new guest in, following the schedule I'd set. She didn't know how to fight it because I hadn't broken a single rule. Everything was legally clean. I could see the cracks starting to appear in her calm facade. The first time I noticed it was when she finally came back one afternoon, holding a suitcase in her hands. I knew immediately what she was going to say. She was trying to act tough, but I could see the wear and tear on her face. Fine. I'm going back to my parents, she said, looking me in the eye. You've won. Happy? I didn't flinch. I didn't want to win, Sophie. I just wanted to get my life back. She scoffed, her voice filled with bitterness. You're so smug, you know that? You really think you're better than me, don't you? I shrugged. I don't think I'm better. I just think that when someone makes a choice, They should be ready for the consequences of it. She gritted her teeth, but I could see she was starting to understand that there was no way out of this. She couldn't force me to leave, and she couldn't force me to feel guilty for what I'd done. The apartment, once a place we had shared together, was now something I controlled, just like my life. "You've taken everything from me," she said, her voice trembling. But I could tell it wasn't about the apartment anymore. It was about something deeper, something she was too afraid to confront. "You've turned my world upside down." I sighed, a little tired of the drama. "You didn't care about me enough to be honest, Sophie. You didn't care enough to trust me. You think I've taken everything from you, but you were the one who threw it all away. All I did was open my eyes and take control. You should try it sometime." Her eyes narrowed. "And that's it, huh? That's all you have to say? You've taken my apartment, and now you're going to make me leave. Just like that?" I couldn't help but smile, though it was a smile full of irony. "You know, I didn't make you leave. You chose to. You could have stayed, Sophie. You could have taken control of the situation, but you didn't. And now you're going back to your parents' house because you couldn't accept reality." She didn't say anything more after that. She grabbed her suitcase, and without a word, she left. I heard the front door slam behind her, and I felt a sense of finality. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel like I had won anything. But I did feel like I had finally found a way out of the mess that had been my life for the past few years. The next few days were quiet. Sophie didn't try to contact me anymore. She couldn't. She had nothing to hold over me. No threats, no manipulation. She had been left with nothing but her pride, and I had no interest in destroying that further. I wasn't some petty person trying to break her. I had simply made my own choice to take control of my life, and now that I had done that, everything felt empty. I sat on the couch, sipping a coffee, the apartment quieter than it had been in months. I realized I had made the right decision, but it wasn't for revenge. Not really, it was for me. It was about reclaiming my self-worth, about regaining control of my own life. The apartment was mine now in a way. I managed it, sure, but in truth it was the symbol of something far bigger. My independence, my clarity, my decision to stop being a passive participant in my own life. I had set boundaries. I had taken the space I needed. And Sophie? She was gone. She had lost the ability to control this space, to control me. And that, in the end, was what she had always feared the most. I hadn't broken any laws. I hadn't raised my voice in anger. I hadn't destroyed anything in a fit of rage. I had simply used the rules that were already in place to make sure that I had a seat at the table again. And that was the sweetest victory of all.